Good morning, number one. And number two, I'm so honored and happy to be here with you all today. And I want to thank CAPA and AFAY for inviting me. And it's an honor to celebrate the 10th anniversary with you all of this organization. And I want to thank Yale for hosting this great event today. And I have to admit, I'm a little intimidated to be in front of this audience right now. Okay, so many of you are great researchers, you are scientists, you are scholars, you have published in top journals, you've brought in millions of dollars in grants, and you're doing groundbreaking research that will change the world. Okay, I, on the other hand, have done none of those things. Okay, and I often say that I'm good at three things. One, I'm good at writing. Number two, I'm good at lifting heavy things. And number three, I'm good at driving. That's it. Okay? But in all seriousness, I'm very proud to be here today because things are so hard in America today. Okay? And I'm just going to tell you right now, anyone contemplating being a high-level administrator, a provost, or a president, I'm just going to tell you to think twice. Okay? Because it is not an easy job right now. Things are very, very challenging. Things are incredibly hard in higher education. We know that through watching the media, we know that through reading all the news. But what does that mean for folks like us, personally and professionally? And I'm not even talking about all of the turmoil that's happening on campuses across the country. It's a precarious time, no doubt, in that way. I'm talking about just the day-to-day. What does it mean to be a good professor and a good teacher and a good scholar? And not to mention, what does it mean to be a good spouse? To be a good parent or a neighbor or a friend? It feels like there's great pressure, there's great tension everywhere, right? It's hard. Okay. But regardless of whether or not we were born here or whether we immigrated here, no matter how long we have lived here, and no matter how much we have accomplished, there are some, if not many, who may never look at us as real Americans, whether they realize this consciously or not. And why? It's simple. Because of our faces, right? Because of our eyes. Because of how we spell our names. Because the accents that some of us may speak with. It's something we have to face with brutal honesty if we're going to continue to make progress in trying to achieve the American dream. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, okay? My family is originally from mainland China, Beijing. They left China when Mao came to power and they fled to Taiwan. Okay, my mother was 6 months old at that time. I was born in Taiwan, Taipei, in 1972. And my parents had a very good life. My family had a good life. My grandmother was still a senator in the Kuomintang, and my parents were both teachers. We moved to the United States in 1973, when I was just a year old. Okay, my parents came here to the United States for a better life, for me. But life wasn't necessarily better. My mother spoke some English. She was an English teacher back in Taiwan, and so she was able to get a job waitressing, and she was able to do that. My father did not speak good English, so he went from being a teacher to pumping gas and stocking shelves in the grocery store. You know, we lived on Long Island in New York, and we were the only non-white family in our neighborhood. At school, I was teased and I was bullied. I didn't understand anything about anything except that I was different. And as a kid growing up, I always knew, I always felt that I was an outsider. Yeah. But growing up wasn't all horrible, right? I had really good parents, and there were a lot of things I loved and I looked forward to. And one of them was Kung Fu theater. Okay? Some of you may remember, if you grew up in the United States in the 80s, Every Saturday afternoon, there was a Kung Fu movie. And you scrambled to make sure you got home at 3 o'clock to watch that Kung Fu movie. And these were mostly Hong Kong movies in the 70s. They were very poorly dubbed, but they were scintillating. You know, for a 10-year-old Chinese boy in New York, those 2 hours were such an important escape. Because growing up in the 80s, day to day, I had no heroes. I already worshiped Bruce Lee, even though he died 1 year before I was born. And we loved Bruce Lee so much that we even loved his impersonators. It didn't matter, right? Because they looked like me. They allowed me, a young Chinese boy in New York, to kind of dream, right? Because when there wasn't Kung Fu theater or Bruce Lee or one of his impersonators, there was no me. There was no fantasy me that I could look up to anywhere except my parents. Not my teachers, not my coaches, not on TV or in the movies. Even the movies that I grew up with, the martial arts movies that I grew up with, had white heroes. So everyone's seen The Karate Kid, right? The original Karate Kid? Yes? Let's just show raise of hands. Okay. Can we just meditate for a moment on how ridiculous it is that in California, or in Bloodsport for instance, that a white hero or white kids in California or in Hong Kong compete in martial arts and win and beat all of the Asians? Is it possible? Sure. Is it statistically probable? You're researchers and scientists. Not really, right? So this is what I grew up with. Okay, so it gives you a kind of programming. Even the television show Kung Fu, and some of you probably know this, starred a non-Asian actor playing a Shaolin monk, and that was a role that Bruce Lee, the real Bruce Lee, was passed up for. Okay. So in high school, I was one of 3 Asians. And I did everything I could to not think about being Chinese, because I didn't want to. I was still an outsider, and nothing was going to change that. I just wanted to blend in day to day. But I do remember one moment during that time, and it would be a moment that would eventually change my life. I remember watching the events of Tiananmen Square unfold for days. And I remember being shocked and unsure what I was supposed to think and what I was supposed to feel and what I was supposed to do. But I remember feeling like I was connected to what was happening, even though it was on the other side of the world. So in college, I decided I was going to be a writer. So I studied and I found my literary heroes. Cormac McCarthy, Don DeLillo, Philip Roth, William Faulkner. Do you see any similarities? I didn't study Chinese or Asian writers. I was too ignorant and too stubborn to explore. I was still pushing away my Chinese history and my heritage. And it wasn't until graduate school that I asked myself, what pushed me? What shaped me? What disrupted me? And it forced me to see and embrace who I was and who my family was. And I thought back to Tiananmen Square and the man in front of the tanks. I wanted to know who he was. My first novel is Sons of Heaven. It imagines the life of the tank man. It was a test. It was the one thing that has changed every aspect of my life. Because Sons of Heaven, to me, was a reconciliation. I had to reconcile the fact that there was so much I did not know about Chinese history, about my own family's history, and about myself. My second novel has a funny story. My wife and I got married on a Saturday, and the next day on a Sunday, our wedding announcement came out in the New York Times. On Monday, I got a call from an editor. an Asian woman, and she said, she had read Sons of Heaven, and she said, do you want to write a book? The answer is yes, whenever an editor says, do you want to publish or write a book, or something to that effect. So Deep in the Mountains was published 2 years later, and it was another journey of reconciliation. It allowed me to delve further into art, the study of Chinese painting, and connecting that to my own grandmother, who was a politician, but also a painter. It allowed me to examine my own past, the complex relationship between immigrant parents and first-generation children, the balance between being seen and unseen, being young and finding yourself, and coming to terms with who and what you are. So, in my career, I have been very, very lucky. But I believe luck only comes to those who work hard. I'm lucky I didn't have parents that forced me to do anything I didn't really want to do. Just like Chinese school, right? They really pushed me to stay in Chinese school. At the end of the day, I fought hard enough, and they said, okay, fine. I wanted to play baseball at the time. You can see that didn't work out so much, so again, my parents were right. But they didn't force me to do it, okay? This gave me the flexibility to pursue my writing, and that led to my first novel, and that led to my academic career. I've always been a worker that wound up leading. Does that make sense? You do the work, and then you end up being in a leadership role because of the work. I was never the smartest person in the room, but I was always the hardest working person in the room. But now, in this role, as Chancellor of a system, with 10,000 employees, 85,000 students across all of Connecticut, I continue to learn how to be a leader first, and that's a different kind of work. So I'm no longer an academic, really. I had this very sad epiphany that I'm not an academic anymore. Maybe someday I'll return to that life, but my role today is diplomat, convener, politician, ambassador, visionary, spokesperson, and many other things. I'm not supposed to be in the weeds. I'm not supposed to be in the details, but I love the weeds and the details. This is part of my struggle. As an immigrant, as a poor kid from New York, as a person of color, I grew up working, always working. I didn't take a real vacation until I started dating my wife. And she said, what is wrong with you? You know, what are you, crazy? We're gonna go away for a week. I said, a week? What are you crazy? I can't be away from my laptop for a week. You know, that's how I was wired. I still have a little bit of a problem. It's hard for me to trust others to do it the way I want it done. It's hard for me not to control everything because the outcome is so important. The outcome is important itself, right? If you take pride in your work, you care about the outcome. I don't care if you're cleaning your room or you're working on a big project or a grant or you're writing a book. You care about the outcome. Okay? But as people of color in America, in academia, in leadership, we are judged differently. Let's be honest. Okay, and we've already started talking about this. There is implicit bias. If the work is not perfect, it's not just a reflection on you or me. It's a reflection on all of us. It's a reflection on all of our people. We don't look like the majority of the rooms and spaces that we inhabit in America, and it affects us. It makes a difference. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. I want everyone to close your eyes. Don't worry, nothing weird is going to happen. Okay, everybody close your eyes. Raise your hand if you have felt that you were overlooked or undermined or treated differently because of your race. Keep your eyes closed. Maybe your ideas and solutions were put aside. Maybe you were just looked over or looked through or disrespected and you couldn't explain why. So if that has ever happened to you, raise your hands. Raise them high. Okay, now open your eyes and look around. Open your eyes and look around. Most of us, right? Okay. Good. Close your eyes again. Again, I promise, nothing weird. Again, now raise your hand if in any of those moments you were silent when you felt you were being treated this way. Keep your eyes closed. Raise your hands. Keep your eyes closed. Okay, put your hands down. Now you can open your eyes. The guy over there is confused. He's like, it's not calisthenics, my friend. You're good, don't worry. I asked you to keep your eyes closed for that one because that's very personal, right? That moment where you feel you're being treated a certain way and maybe you didn't kind of react the way you might have wanted to. But the model minority mindset is real, right? Keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, fit in, don't make trouble. How many times have we heard our parents or our elders say that to us? Don't make trouble. I grew up with it. I'm sure many of you did as well. It's only been in the last 5 years that I've pushed back. In my role now, I cannot afford to be a model minority. It would be an injustice to the system that I work for, that I serve, which is more than 50% non-white. And it would be an injustice to my family and to my children. It would be an injustice to anyone who looks like me or looks at me and watches how I do things. Whether I like it or not, I am a role model and I am a target. In your more quiet moments after today, maybe you're driving home, maybe you have a peaceful moment Sunday or Tuesday or whenever it might be, I want you to ask yourself if you can afford to be a model minority. In my role, I'm often attacked and criticized in the media or judged for certain things, and I wonder all the time, were those who came before me held to such a high standard? Were they such targets? Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't, but I believe that evidence shows that there's a difference. It's what makes implicit bias so insidious because it's not intentional sometimes, but it's certainly impactful. This doesn't mean I'm always going to get into a fight. We can't do that. But we have to be cognizant and engaged and find ways to make sure that we are strategic in how we present ourselves and choose thoughtfully when we fight. I tell my own daughters all the time, we have to speak up to injustice. And we have to make sure that we work 10 times harder so our voices and our ideas and our work are felt and respected. It is unfair. It is a tax. It is a burden. But it's true. But this is the America that my parents came here for. And they gave me the opportunity to be who I am and do what I do. And I can't complain. I am extremely fortunate, and I can't thank my parents enough. We all know the proverb, one generation plants the trees and another gets the shade. That's my personal story, our history. That is what writes the history for my kids and beyond. And you all are a part of that history too. Our school textbooks may never represent the Chinese or Asian American experience properly. So it's up to us to make sure that it is. You missed a slide? There we go. That is what gives me hope. For that lonely 10-year-old boy who became the 30-year-old writer that doubted his work, who's now the 52-year-old man who is in a position to change things. Maybe just a little, but every little bit counts. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for having me as a guest, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this truly remarkable day. Thank you.